about the man who was arrested in Aspen for calling the police douchebags? do you think Aspen police are douchebags?
I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been over in Aspen. The last time I was there, they kind of drove me out of town. Being obnoxious at that hotel there called the Jerome or something like that. I think I threw up on the bar or something. No, it's interesting. The last time I was there, things had changed quite a bit. And I know Thompson was so discouraged that all of a sudden he started getting drunk at 10 o'clock instead of 11. And he'd say, you know, why are you bothering? It's lost and things like that. And that's where he was coming from in the last 30 years. You know, he would write something that he essentially decided it just couldn't be effective. That was too bad. I think it makes the Aspen environment, I don't know. All those rich people over there, I don't know whether they are or not. I suspect they're probably not, unless you're a worker. Because I can't imagine them rousting the trust funders and Hollywood people and things like that, and being allowed to keep their jobs. Now,
do you think that if cannabis ingested were ultimately proven to cure cancer outright, that would be a strong enough push to get it outright legalized?
no.
No? Even if these senators and legislatures end up with family members themselves, they'll just use it themselves and won't actually legalize it?
There's too much at stake. First off, think of this. You've got a whole generation of police that have staked their whole reason for being on enforcing drug laws. All of a sudden, drugs are good. That means their whole life will have been for nothing. So psychologically, they can't. Secondly, it doesn't matter whether it's a cure or not, because you don't have control of the premise. And that's not the issue now. The issue is, I'm in power, I can wield this power, I'm right, and I don't care what you say, I'm not going to change my mind. Unless you do something drastic. And whether or not it cures cancer, or whether it replaces Viagra, it doesn't matter.
It does both, but how do we not get super depressed when you say there's nothing we can do?
Well, because you got to think of the things you can do. Imaginative things. Now you say, I can't do anything for me.
What's the deal with juries?
What do you mean, what's the deal with juries? They hate them.
People call them the fourth branch of government.
Yeah. Not the way they are now. They don't like them. There has been, Walter Grace and I were working on a jury thing back in the 60s. They were trying to take away the right for juries. And it's that old. They don't want them. What they're saying now is this is the province of the judge and this is the province of the jury. And the judge interprets the law and the jury decides whether the facts relate to a conviction. Well, I can say categorically, if that's the way that things were in the 60s and 70s, I'd never won a drug case and I'd never won a draft case. Because when I get there, and I'd say, you know, nobody knows what you're doing in that jury room. And if you think this is bad, convict my client. But if you think like I do that is bullshit, come back with a not guilty verdict. The DA is going to tell you to send a message. Well, my answer there is if you want to send a message, take an ad out in the Wall Street Journal. Don't take it out on my client. And I say, well, go there and send a message. Tell the judge, tell the public, tell the DA that we got better things to do than to listen to this bullshit. Now, I think that's called jury nullification. And again, it's part of sovereignty. You know, think of this. We had a whole civil rights movement because a woman refused to go to the back of the bus, a black lady, because she was tired. And they arrested her because the law said she had to sit in the back of the bus. That was an unfair law. if the juries were told like they are now, you can't judge the law, where would the civil rights movement have been? But the simple fact of the matter is, the laws made and administered by mainly lawyers, and the one thing that's done lately over the last few decades is really subtle. But we have gone from an accusatorial common law system to a Napoleonic system of civil law. We've abolished the presumption of innocence, and we act like we're operating under the Napoleonic Code. Military Code of Justice, Code of Military Justice is the Napoleonic Code. And all of Europe operates on a Napoleonic Code, and the worst Napoleonic codes in history were Franco's Spain, and Mussolini's Italy, and Hitler's Germany, and Stalin's Russia. So people thought the Russian system was bad, the Russians did this, that, and the other. Well, the Queen, before they cut off her head, was a big fan of Napoleon. And so she imported the whole bureaucracy of France and set up the Russian system. And after the Russians had the revolution, they threw out the Tsar and a few people like that, but they kept the Napoleonic system there. Now that's what goes on now. So, they're going to twiddle away a little bit, one at a little right at a time, and they're brainwashing us. They got control of the propaganda, and it used to be when I first started, the idea of justice was fairness. Now the press says if somebody doesn't get put in jail for 1 million years, he escaped justice. Justice is now equated with vengeance. We got to start calling them all this stuff. Call them more Hispanics. So what's the question? The question is, do we have a 10th Amendment anymore? If we told the feds to go to hell, we're a sovereign nation, or a sovereign state, and so try to stop us, we have done this, etc., etc. Well, would you spin your wheels? Probably. Again, who appoints the judges? And in federal court, they're appointed for life. And we've had 30 years of Nazis appointing judges. They can send people to hell with drills. So, I think right now, the way you're going to get social change is what they're doing in Egypt. In fact, I was at a lawyers guild meeting one time. The lawyers in Pakistan were on strike. Pakistan, which is not a symbol of democracy and freedom, because the Supreme Court had done a few things they didn't approve. And I tell people, lawyers, I'm really embarrassed being here addressing you. While our brothers and sisters go over to Pakistan and get rocks thrown at them, or worse, and we're sitting around telling us how great and how progressive we are, and things like that, patting each other on the back, when actually we're just assholes. And it's got to take some movement. It's got to take some commitment. And it's going to take some cannon fodder. So are you spinning your wheels? Probably. But what happens when you spin your wheels enough? Pretty soon you hit bedrock. And the mud runs out and you get somewhere. The problem is that they got all the weapons that we take the casualties. The question is, how can they use the Commerce Clause and say things are in interstate commerce when any idiot can tell it's not? Because marijuana is grown here and it's used in the state and things like that. Well, it's because they can say, is it in interstate commerce or does it affect interstate commerce? And I think you can make an argument that since there's a bunch of marijuana going on here, we're not importing as much from Mexico, and the Mexican politicians aren't making enough, we're affecting their election. Therefore, not only is it affecting interstate commerce, it's affecting international commerce. Now we got to give them more money to kill more people. What the hell? Again, they've got the CIA managing things, and who the hell knows what's going on? What I do know is they're bribing legislators. If I did what the government did, I'd be in jail. Let's take a good example. 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. Nobody out here wants a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Hell no.
Have anybody tried to drive across Texas at 55 miles an hour? You know, it's terrible driving across Kansas City. But what happened? The Department of Transportation said, if you lower your speed limits, we'll give you X million of dollars in order to repair your roads. Now, when I grew up, that was called a bribe. But nobody calls it a bribe, that's an incentive. But since when does the federal government, why is only the federal government, Department of Transportation, and law enforcement gets to bribe the politicians? I'm for equal bribery. When I ran for DA, I said I was for equal corruption. I would take from anybody according to his ability and according to the need. I didn't think it was unfair that only the rich people could bribe politicians. It's a matter of priorities. What's important to you. And you can make compromises, and you don't have to be out every day doing this, that, or the other. But you can do it in a way that you can be effective. Okay, I got one for you. This guy gets arrested for calling a cop a douchebag. What about the motorist in New Jersey who gets charged with a felony for televising or videotaping a cop doing bad things? You hear anything about that in the press much? You know, I talk about shocking the conscience. You know, everybody here should be writing the legislators out there and the judges out there asking what's wrong with them. What are they hiding? Where's the sunshine laws there? Of course, I don't know, I've been out in New Jersey, there's not a sunshine laws, particularly this time of year, but there's not much anymore here. Next.
Down in Colorado Springs, we had a Sierra High School student who's a legal patient, and he ends up being told that he can't take his pill form cannabis when he goes home to medicate it with it and come back to school. The superintendent and everybody, the school board seems to be pretty adamant about preventing this young man from being able to medicate. You got any creative ideas of how we might respond to a situation like this?
That's because it's the evil weed. I think maybe you ought to start a petition that the people in the school get an education and maybe take a high school science course.
That school is the lowest tip of Colorado license. Is that right?
Well, yeah. I'll tell you, what they're doing now, they're organizing again. The probation departments and the jails are all getting together saying you can't have your medicine in jail, you can't have your medicine while you're on probation. Why not? So my answer to that is, I can tell my clients, you're going to have to step up the plate and say, fuck you, I'll go to jail.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, I think if we had a lot of people doing that, taking away the profit incentive, they might take a different view. But that's the kind of action it's going to take. And it's not going to, it's going to have to be something other than somebody going to court saying, put me in jail. You're going to have to get headlines out. And you're going to have a demonstration saying this is what's going on. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Look, I got a question.
Yeah.
Given the fact that all of this over-regulation and stuff is directly affecting the livelihood of the people that are applied to the MMC centers, why do you think that they're so poorly represented at these hearings and stuff? The Department of Revenue hearing that we had 2 weeks ago, which enacted the 96 pages of rules that they're supposed to follow, there were only literally 5 MMC owners showed up to testify out of the supposedly 750 in the state. Well, what do you think that apathy is? Is that apathy unusual, and what can we do, or is it worth our effort to try to clear it?
Yeah, I've been watching this for a number of years, and I think there's this malaise that there's nothing we can do. So if there's nothing we can do, why bother? Or let somebody else do it. Or I'm not making enough money, I gotta feed my kids, I gotta do this, gotta do that. And, there's some values in there. And again, who wants to go to a hearing when they sit around and bullshit each other, and then it's nothing happens. What you got to do is you got to have some reason to get the press there and make it a news event. So maybe with the Department of Revenue, everybody should go there and stuff toilet paper down the urinals and block them up. Because they're so full of shit that you never something like that, something dramatic. Because they're going to just talk through the hearings, and then they're going to say, well, you had a chance to testify. We're like these numbnut judges when I talk about something, they say, well, Mr. Blewitt, take that up with the legislature. Well, I wouldn't think that the judge would get where he was to be such a dumbass. Anybody knows how the legislation works, but they smugly say that, because it's a way of avoiding their duty to uphold and to interpret the law in a situation or in a form that favors the people rather than. I got my first introduction to drug enforcement when I was with King, because the Red Squad used to shake everybody down and plant marijuana on some of the markers so they could say that they were drug smoking, no good for nothing people, and there was a prejudice back then. So one of the things we used to do is search the marchers and release randomly so we could say they were searched and they weren't a bunch of potheads out there trying to overthrow the white establishment. And the Red Squad, we still got a Red Squad. It's the same organization they had in the 50s and things like that. They worked the same way, and they privatized a lot of it, which is to me, it's scary as hell. Yeah. Blackwater or something. No, we should look at that. The problem is it changes from so fast, it's hard to keep up with it.